All right, let's talk about Waxwork 2 Lost in Time. Got the Vestron Blu-ray 2-pack. Yeah, Waxwork 2 Lost in Time. This came out in 1992 and is once again written and directed by Anthony Hickox, who did the first one. And he did like Sundown, the vampire movie, Hellraiser 3, the Warlock sequel called Armageddon. Yeah, this guy's done quite a few horror movies, and this stars Zach Galligan once again. Deborah Foreman from Part 1 does not return to play her character, and what this movie is about is after the events of Part 1, Deborah Foreman's character, what's her name? Sarah, her character is in legal trouble. She's being prosecuted for the murder of her stepdad, and they have to find evidence at the waxwork, but then it's burnt down to the ground. There is no evidence. So now they have to go like back in time to find evidence to support her story about what happened to her dad. And they end up getting stuck in time and separated. He has to try to find her and then save her from this demon lord. It gets pretty crazy. The tagline for this movie says, "A killer is waiting in the past, present, and future." But I don't remember them ever going into the future, unless you want to say that alien segment was the future. But the way that ship looked and the technology, it looks like it's pretty old school. In case you didn't know, I already have a review for the first Waxwork. And I also talk about it in my top 10 of 1988 ranking. I believe I had it in like the number 5 spot. So I really like the first Waxwork. I did not like this movie when I first saw it a couple years ago. I was dreading going back to rewatch it because I remembered this movie being pretty terrible. I thought it was just too comical and slapstick, like Three Stooges, like just too over the top and like way too long and just kind of overstayed its welcome. Like I just remember not liking this movie. Surprisingly, on rewatch, I actually kind of enjoyed it. And what I like about this movie is that I love that it picks up like right after Part 1. We get like a very brief like recap of that epic fight at the end of Part 1 and the place burning down, that dude getting his head ripped right off, and then the place is burning down and then the hand crawls out. It picks up the second the last movie ended at. So I love that. It's kind of like the Friday the 13th movies, it just picks right up afterwards. And I love how the story is set up here, like the explanation for why they have to go back through these portals into different times, and like they're looking for evidence. I like that idea. I like that there's this courtroom drama, this trial going on. It makes sense that there would be this trial after what happens in the open. And I really do like the open, the whole like idle hands open, and that very bloody geyser coming out of the sink. Like it's a funny, it's definitely more goofy than the first one. It's a goofy a good tone setter for the film with lots of blood, and it's just ridiculous. You got George Buck Flower playing this abusive drunk stepdad. It's a good open. It's not fantastic. It's probably a little too goofy for some people, but I didn't mind it this time. I actually thought it was alright. This movie actually has some pretty shockingly gory kills, a little over the top and cartoony in one or two moments, but it's much more graphic than I remembered. I thought this one was more tame than Part 1, but I would say this one's just as gory, if not maybe slightly more than the original. I also appreciated some of the cool cameos we got in this movie from actors I know, like David Carradine and Bruce Campbell. Like it was just awesome to see them. I even read that Drew Barrymore plays vampire victim number 1. I didn't notice her, but apparently she's in this movie. And the defense attorney is played by the lead actress in Beyond the Door. I like that in this movie, what they changed from the first one is that when they're in these different levels, they can actually get hurt and killed. In Part 1, they acted like, well, if you just don't believe in it, they can't hurt you. It's not real. In this movie, it is real. I also appreciate that they continued the premise of Part 1. They don't have the waxwork building no more, but I liked how they introduced this device that allows them to open up these portals, and we get to see quite a few different segments These segments aren't as good as the ones in part one with like the mummy, the werewolf, and the gothic like mansion filled with vampires and the zombie segment in black and white. I think those segments in one were better than this one, but these are still okay. You got like an alien segment and the Frankenstein one and the haunted house segment that's also in black and white. And so they're fine. I just don't think they compare to part one. But I think the best segments in this one are the ones that are very short lived for just like a minute or less towards the end during that like final sword battle between good and evil. They're going through like all these different stages. Like that's a pretty fun like final fight. What I don't like about this movie though is the recasting. It's probably not their fault. She didn't want to come back, or I'm not sure what the story is there, why she didn't come back, but it's a shame that Deborah Foreman did not return for this movie to keep the cast continuity going. They brought back Zach Galligan, and now, when the movie starts, it's just jarring at first. You're like, wait, who's this? Oh, that's supposed to be Sarah? It's just a little confusing at first, and she's just not as strong of an actress as Deborah Foreman. And, I talked about recasting recently in Sleepaway Camp 2, but the reason why it works there is because A, I like Pamela Springsteen's performance as Angela, and B, there's a time jump there. If this movie took place like 10, 15 years in the future, then replacing Deborah Foreman would make sense. But it's not. It's the same exact night. It's picking up right afterwards. So replacing Deborah Foreman with this lady who I don't know, it's jarring and I don't like it. This movie also suffers from some pretty aged visual effects, glowing lights and stuff that just looks corny, and the creature effects don't look that great. I think the gore effects look good, but when you see like alien creatures and this werewolf transformation towards the end, it just does not look good. It's very rubbery and looks like a guy in a suit. The alien just was not convincing or scary looking in the slightest. I also was not a fan of the score of the movie. It's a first time composer, I read. It has like this beat, like some kind of instrumental that you could probably like rap to. Like it's weird. And then this movie ends with a rap music video during the credits, which was very odd. But it has like the same sounding like beat in every segment, where every segment should actually have its own separate, unique sound and vibe. This movie uses really like cartoony sound effects to like add comedy to certain moments, but to me, cartoony sound effects just aren't funny. And I also found the writing of this movie to just be too overly like convoluted and very contrived. Like I didn't like the whole aspect of, I just didn't see why it was necessary. Like the the fact that Sarah is like mind possessed, like she forgets who she is. She has like amnesia, or she's thinking she's someone else, but this isn't happening to Zach at all. Like, why is that? It doesn't make sense. Why isn't like he having to be reminded of who he really is? Every time they land in a different era, she's convinced that she's somebody else for a moment and kind of goes back and forth a bit between personalities. And he has to like snap her out of it, and it's really easy to do so. He just has to be like, "Hey, you're Sarah," and she's like, "Oh, that's right, I'm Sarah." Like, really, like, just get rid of that whole aspect of the film. Just make it them going from place to place. Don't overcomplicate things. And I wish they didn't spend so much time at the last place they go to. Or I guess technically it's not the last place, because during their final fight they go from place to place to place. But, the majority of the whole, like, it's the last hour, really. This movie's an hour and 45 minutes, and at least 45 minutes or so, maybe longer, is in this last, level that they go to, this like Army of Darkness era, where it's like knights and shiny armor, and like I wish they would have went somewhere else. If they're gonna spend like 45 minutes in some place, like put it somewhere else, because I'm not a fan of that look and style. So final thoughts, this is a goofier sequel that isn't as successful as the original in the comedy, the effects, and the writing, but it's still entertaining and not as bad as I remembered. I think if you're a fan of the original, it's worth checking out, but just lower your expectations a bit. So when it comes to Waxwork 2 Lost in Time, I'll give it 3 out of 5 stars. So, spoiler discussion. In the open, they walk away from the burning building, and this severed hand follows them all the way home, goes into Sarah's home, and kills her stepdad, who was a real abusive drunk. So it's like, good riddance, Buck Flower. He gets a hammer to his face, and he's doing nothing to protect himself. I love how in movies, a like severed hand somehow has so much like power and leverage and like can hold you down and strangle you, and like they can't just pull it off. Like it doesn't weigh a lot. It would be easy to just take it off of your neck, but it's like strangling him and then hits him in the head with a hammer, and he's not blocking the hammer from hitting him in the face. And then she's put on trial for that murder, which is realistic. I believe that. And during this courtroom trial, they are talking about part one, what happened at the Waxwork, and they say that 200 people or over 200 people died there. I question that. It's been a while since I saw part one. I do remember there was like this epic like brawl where there was all kinds of people running in there fighting the like statues that came to life. But I don't remember it being 200 people. Maybe close to 100, but 200? I don't think so. There's a cute little nod to Jason Voorhees where Zach Galligan goes into like his dead relative's room that has like a collection of shit he's collected from, I don't know, evil people in the past he's killed, I guess, or some evil artifacts, like that room in The Conjuring where they keep all that evil shit. Like he has like all this stuff around, and then in one of the boxes he just picks up a bloody hockey mask. When they first go through like the portal and they're falling in this like void, it's just black all around them. There's this god awful like stop motion deadite flying around them, some kind of like gargoyle flying bat. Like it looks terrible. Frankenstein's monster looks very similar in a way to the zombie in Cabin in the Woods, like the dad zombie of that like cannibal zombie family, whatever they were supposed to be. He kind of has his look a bit. I love when Frankenstein's monster kills his creator. He grabs Frankenstein and grabs his skull and crushes it, and his eyeballs pop out of his skull. Blood's gushing out of his mouth. Then his brains shoot out the top of his head. And then we get like this moment straight out of Malignant as of recent. This is way before that, but it took me right back to Malignant because I love that movie. And what Frankenstein does here that's similar to that movie is a spoiler for that movie, I guess. So he takes his hand, this big ass monster, he just rams his whole arm, right through the little guy. Not sure what his name was, but he just rams his whole arm through the back, his back through his chest. It was pretty awesome. I guess you could say it's kind of similar to Terminator 3. Then we get this alien ripoff segment. It's very much like paying homage to aliens. I think even like her hair is supposed to be similar to Ripley. It just kind of looked like they were trying to make her look like Ripley. And so the alien in this segment just looks really cheesy. And it even has like the thing coming out of its mouth. There's a dead body on the ground with like some chest burster hanging out of it. And then what happens to this one guy was pretty awesome. Like he's getting his head slowly ripped off, but then like right when it's about to fully rip off his neck, the alien takes his almost severed head and just throws it back down onto his body, and his head just crushes. That was pretty fucking awesome. What wasn't awesome though was the shot of the astronauts floating in space. That effect was so poorly done. Then we get the black and white haunted house segment, and Bruce Campbell is in this one. And we get some like physical comedy here. Bruce Campbell is like getting hurt and all kinds of shit's being thrown at his face, which makes sense. It's Bruce Campbell. That's the kind of comedy that's in the Evil Dead movies. He's always getting hurt in very comical ways. But he has his chest, like the skin peeled off, so his rib cage is exposed, and there's like a crow like pecking at his chest cavity, and then like she throws a packet of salt at his chest wound. That was pretty painful to look at. Then at some point, Zach Galligan manages to regroup with Sarah. At some point, they separated. They went through two different like portals. So she ended up in the alien segment, and he was in the haunted house segment. When they regroup, I was thinking at first like, oh wow, how easy! Like he just went through one extra door. Like it took one trip to get back to her. Like how did he find her? But then he drops a line of dialogue that suggests that he's actually been on multiple adventures that we did not get to see. He's talking about the Loch Ness Monster took something from him, and he's like, I was battling these people. Like, so there's a whole nother movie we could have gotten. And then right after this scene, he goes through a portal again with her this time, so they don't get separated. But he forgets the one thing that he needs to find his way out of the next area. Like, how do you forget the one thing that you need? He just leaves it on the ground, and then him and her just run through the portal, and then they end up at the next place. He's like, oh wait, I forgot the important device that's critical. We get a quick cameo from David Carradine, and then we find out later on that that was supposedly like Zach Galligan's dad or grandpa, just coming to him in the form of somebody else, some beggar, and gives him like this Excalibur sword or whatever. And then this is when the movie just kind of loses steam, and this is when I don't like the movie as much. Like, everything I've been talking about up to this point was great. This movie could have been rated a lot higher if the rest of the movie kind of played out the same way as the first half. The second half is where it loses points. I don't like the rest of this movie as much. We find out that the ultimate bad guy of this movie is this demon lord, as he's described on the back, played by the guy in Die Hard, the long blonde hair guy. And what I found odd is that he has all this power, he can get all these women, but all he does is make out with like their belly. Like they're fully clothed, and he's just like, they're on his lap, and he's like making out with their belly, like in between their breasts, like in mid chest, he's just kissing them. Like you have all this power, like realistically this guy would have been fucking them or like sucking on her titties at least. We get this random like werewolf effect that just kind of comes out of nowhere. This woman is brought in, she's tied up, and then she turns into a werewolf, and it looks terrible. Like her face is very rubbery. It just, you don't even really think it's a werewolf at first. Like, what am I looking at? It looks like E.T. almost mixed with werewolf. Then we get this scene that takes the movie in a whole new direction, and we get some ridiculous, absurd explanation for what's really going on here. Like in the first one, it was just this guy played by David Warner trying to get one person to die in each of the displays at the Waxwork so that he could like get some power or destroy the world. Okay, whatever. In this one, his dead relative comes to him, Zach Galligan, his dead relative comes to him as a like crow, some bird, and starts talking to him as the bird and tells him, and maybe I misheard it, but this is what I got from it. He tells him that he is a time warrior and he is now in like God's Nintendo game, and this is like a battle between good and evil, God and the devil are like playing some video game, and he's like a video game character that God's controlling. Like, is this like that episode of South Park where Kenny's in heaven with a golden PSP and he's controlling God's angels on the PSP, and there's a battle between heaven and hell? The angels have to fight all the demons and souls of hell. Like, that's what it reminded me of when he was explaining it. I'm like, is that what they're going for? He's just a playable character? We're not in like some actual place that existed in history. We're in some weird video game that God and the devil are playing? Is that what they're telling me? Because that's batshit insane. I thought it was a little stupid that the one guy didn't make things a little bit more clear to the soldiers why they had to keep an eye on the king and not let him leave. He's like, watch this guy because he's an imposter. We find out that the diehard dude is able to make, using black magic, he makes himself look like the king. So, but this guy who's telling these soldiers, like, hey, keep an eye on this imposter king. He's not really the king. Like, he doesn't tell that to them. He's just saying, hey, keep an eye on this guy who looks like the king and just don't let him leave. But of course they let this guy leave because they think he's the king. He should have made it more clear, like, listen, here's what's going on. This guy is not the king. He's an imposter. We're going to go find the actual king. You just make sure this guy doesn't leave. But he just leaves them there, not understanding the situation at all, which was just stupid. Make things more clear to them. Then we get this sword fight through, like, different movies. They keep going through portals into, like, different movies. Like, they're in, like, Jack the Ripper, London, and then they're in Dawn of the Dead, like, at the mall. And I think one of them's supposed to be dressed up like Tom Savini or someone, like a biker, and then they're like shooting the heads off of zombies. Like, that was pretty awesome to see. And then they land up in like the Godzilla movies of like the 50s. Like, they have like these hair wigs on that make them, I guess, look Japanese. And then when they talk, it's like bad English dubbing, which was hilarious. Then at some point, the bad guy gets pushed up against the cage where the werewolf from earlier is in, and the werewolf takes him and rips him in half, which I think they did in part 1. So is that like an homage to the werewolf kill in part 1? Because I think there's a similar kill in that movie. But it's a pretty gory effect, but it's so quick. It has a really weird like hard cut in between where it's almost hard to realize at first what's happening. You're like, wait, what? You have to like rewind and watch it again. Then for some reason, the portal back home is only taking one passenger this time for some reason. Like, it's contrived. It's like, all right, how do we separate them again? Well, the door is only going to take one of them, so now he has to like make a sacrifice and be like, no, you go. You're more important. You know, you got to go prove your innocence. Take this, severed hand we found that's still moving. And so she goes and she wins, she is found, not guilty, so she wins that case. And then we get like this Back to the Future Part 2 ending where this guy with this letter like shows up and he's like, we've been holding on to this, letter or this package for, decades and generations, just waiting for this day to deliver it to you. It was specifically meant to be delivered on this day, at this location, at this time. Like, it was like almost the same dialogue from the end of Back to the Future Part 2. And so then I think what she was given was like a key to go back in time and be with him again or something. So yeah, that's the end of the movie. But then there's like rap music video playing over the end credits, which I thought was really weird. And the lyrics are like the title of the movie. They're like, Waxwork, Lost in Time. It's really corny. But yeah, so that's the end of Waxwork 2, Lost in Time. What are your thoughts on this sequel? Do you like it more than the original? Or do you hate it? Or do you think it's just okay? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you like what you've seen here, you can hit this like button and become a subscriber today just by clicking on my cartoon face in about 5 seconds. And remember, it's all an opinion. You don't have to get butthurt about it.